Welcome to the Approach podcast. I'm Cassidy Gates, founder of The Approach. This is a place where curiosity comes first. Together we explore the science of behavior, communication, somatic practices, consciousness, leadership, and the patterns that shape how we think, speak, and live. At The Approach, we believe the body prompts, words cast, actions create. Welcome to The Approach. Today we have Mindy Jackson with us. She has her degree, I think, in psychotherapy.
It's a
And
degree
then
in
she's also
psychology.
okay. But you do you're a psychotherapist, correct? And you do Reiki on the side?
Yes, I do Reiki and spiritual coaching.
And then we also have my co-host, Chris.
Hello, I am Pathfinder, helping you guys find some answers.
Mindy, I was going to ask you a little bit more about Reiki.
Okay. What would you like to know?
So I know you describe it being able to use it through the quantum field. If you could just give us a little bit more of a description on that.
Well, if you're familiar with laying on of hands in some of the old Christian churches, very similar, very similar. It is allowing whatever energy is needed to flow through you and the filters of you. So as the Reiki practitioner, you're sort of an open vessel, but you're also a filter at the same time because you're directing that energy. It's very similar also to light language. When you do light language with your hands, you're also doing the same thing as you're allowing that, you're like a bridge, right? You're allowing that, those energy frequencies from the quantum field, from divine level, to come through you as that vessel and that filter, and trust that it will, whatever energy is needed, whatever frequency is needed, will be merged with that person. You can do it on animals, you can do it on plants. So, you can do it on land. Yeah.
Animals can do it on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There, I know a woman out in Missouri who's using horses for equine therapy,
yes.
like that.
Yes, where the
Very
horse
high
stands
EQ.
over the person, and the horse can smell certain things and feel certain energies. The frequency of a horse's energy field is very similar to that of the human. That's why that works so well.
Where did you pick up that piece of information?
I have a friend who had an equine therapy program.
Mm-hmm.
She did the PATH. I forgot what it stands for, but it's for equine therapy. And she had to do all of this training and had to understand it on an energetic level as well, because she wanted to be able to let her clients know that, hey, here's why this is going to work, right? Mm-hmm. So if we give people like a little bit of that, like factual evidence on the front end of things, then they're more likely to buy into what has been deemed woo-woo by a lot of society. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox about.
Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Let's get on the soapbox. Here we go.
Oh,
that's
man.
what we're here for. The soapbox.
Right. Well, the soapbox is, I'm one of those empowered divine feminine that has sacred fury because of all the generations before me that were silenced. All the voices that were made silent, all the women that were made small, all of the women that were made submissive, killed, right? Just for being women. So the systems of control, I'll leave it at that, right? The systems of control put in place all of this conditioning and all of these actions to try to squash the divine feminine because they were scared of it. Why? What's so scary about an empowered woman?
See, I'm not an expert, but what I think is, as humans, we are scared of the familiar. We're scared when it's not familiar. So we had, I believe, in theory, we had more of that intuitive, like you pick up on stuff. Like it's a pattern. So we're picking up on it. We're learning.
Because everything froze. I didn't hear any of that.
No, I can't remember stuff. I have a memory span of like a gnat. Okay. My theory
Can you
is
remember the
that they
nutshell it
were
went in?
scared. Yes. They were
Yeah.
scared of things that they did not understand, not being comfortable with the unknown. And back then, I feel like we were, I mean, sorry, but women do have different genetics and everything else. We pick up on different things. And I feel like we began to be more intuitive. And they had healers back then. And most of the time, it was women. So you make people uncomfortable. Then he's trying to threaten them a little bit if you have a little bit more knowledge back then. And they kind of act through those shadows of like pride, ego.
Well, I mean, it really does come down to, certain empires wanted to have control. And if the message that the masses were getting is that you're sovereign, you can't be controlled. So if the people stand up, just like right now, we need to stand up and say, wait a minute, I didn't give the IRS authority to take 30% of my income. Who made them the authority? They did, didn't they? Like, what do they do with my money?
How'd you get so lucky to only have them take 30%?
Right?
I thought it was 50.
I don't know. I'm trying to get into a higher tax bracket right now. So, but, I think it really does come down to, hey, if we want to use, say, say religion to control the masses, and people rise up and say things that go in opposition of that religion, and they're no longer, I would say, anchored in fearful thinking that's easy to control, and people rise up and say, no, I want to do it this way. We as a group, we're going to do it that way. And then I can know what kind of shit you're pulling behind the curtain because I'm intuitive. So I'm going to call you out on your bullshit. They didn't want that.
No, they just want sheeple.
Yeah, and they still do, but
they still do. Well, that I got a super random question that's related to this, but so what would you say to somebody who would say that like the reason why women's suffrage passed was exactly for that reason? They didn't care. The politicians at the time, they didn't care whether the women got the right to vote. They just wanted a bunch of people who they could instill fear into and potentially move the needle one way or the other, which way they needed. What would you say to something like that?
Well, I think you're completely right. I mean, I'm not some staunch feminist by any means. In fact, I believe in bringing back the balance of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And, seeing as how the sacredness of what the feminine was about, being that sacred portal, being that birthing worlds, not just babies, right? But that's how you birth a world. But birthing ideas, birthing projects, birthing community. That's what the feminine is about. And when you shut that down and turn a sacred portal, a divine feminine sacred portal into a bitch with a uterus, you got a problem.
Well, right. And I would also say that like in the case where that happens, that's a misuse of the masculine energy, because the only place that kind of creative energy can flourish is if you're in a safe place. And if that safe place is a prison, it's not really so safe then, is it?
So, I mean, answer this. Who has been a good example in the last 2,000 plus years since, we'll say, Christ, Yeshua, I call him Shua, who has been a good example ongoing of what a man is supposed to be? The divine masculine. Who taught men to be men?
That is a great question, and I have asked myself that a lot.
So men are carrying the shadow. They're carrying the wound. You know what I mean? So we have wounded men and women who have been disvalued or undervalued. And so the shadow aspect of both, one is power over and toxic masculinity at this point. And women, it's submissiveness. And now, like, because of the anger, because a lot of women who are waking back up don't know how to temper that sacred fury and get caught up in the egoic anger. And then it just like reinforces the idea that you're just a nagging bitch. You're just a loudmouth. Call me that to my face.
See, nobody's really teaching how to redirect these emotions in a good
It's a
way. So, like
therapist.
anger, you just turn it into passion. Like, figure out how to speak without
Right.
dismissing other people or, I mean, man, like, yeah, okay. So, they've learned supposedly through, like, I know that a bunch of them has learned through fear. You have to be this way. You have to take care of all these things. You have to work all the time. Like, we're all told what to be. And I keep always going back to that phrase. If the world asks you who you are and you don't know, well, the world's going to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. I'm reminded of Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, right? Where she, at the beginning of the story, she's talking about she had lived a life going through the motions of what she thought she was expected to be, and she struggled with her mental health and substance abuse and eating disorder, all of that stuff because of it. And she was taking her kids to the zoo one day and they had this cheetah show, and the cheetah had been born in captivity. But she said she was looking at the cheetah while the trainer or whomever was talking, and the cheetah is looking over the zoo wall and into the forest. And she said, in that moment, I realized that there was something primal, even though that cheetah had been born in captivity, there was something primal inside of her that knew that over there is where she was meant to be. And I think that we see a lot of that in society now when people are like, I just feel like there's more to life than this. I feel like I'm meant for something bigger, and then don't know what. And then the world says, no, you're supposed to go to work and pay taxes and, raise kids and, live and die,
Do you
and
want to
maybe
know?
get to go on a vacation occasionally.
Do you want to know the most common phrase I hear that I used to say all the time, and it finally, it just, it just rubbed me the wrong way one day when somebody said it. It is what it is. And I was like, that's the problem, isn't it?
It has its
Is that we're
place.
just accepting it.
Yeah,
That
well,
phrase
when you
has its
push,
place, but it's not always, the best response.
and if you press people on that, they get very frustrated very quickly.
But isn't that the point?
I mean, if
Make
you're
them feel
pushing,
something.
well, I mean, if you're pushing, I mean, it gets me into trouble. I'm one of those people where you either really like me or you really don't like me. And
Same.
I'll give you a hint. I treat everybody the same.
I think when we say it is what it is, what we're trying to say is, I'm trying to accept. Not that I have necessarily accepted, but I'm trying to accept. And if we were being completely honest, we might even go a little further and say, I'm struggling trying to accept. So if I tell myself this, because words are spells, so to speak, right? So if I tell myself it is what it is, that means I have no control over it and I can separate myself from it and I don't feel powerless.
Right.
But
Well,
what if it's
that's another
crossing
way to
your
say that is,
boundary?
Do I?
yeah.
What if it's crossing your boundaries? Like, as in, what if
Oh,
it's
then you need
causing
to take
you
action
harm?
for sure. Yeah.
That's not a moment you would say it is what it is.
No. And if somebody were to say it is what it is when somebody's crossing a boundary of theirs, number one, the first thing I'm going to think is you have very little self-respect. You need to work on that. Two, you need to speak up and say, hey, that's not okay with me, right? Because boundaries aren't about the other person. It's about your own self-respect. What did you start to say, Pathfinders?
I was going to say that it sounds like that kind of direction can just kind of be summed up as more of like a victim mentality.
Yeah, to a degree, I would say that because, like in the world of psychotherapy, we say there's three different types of boundaries, right? Three basic boundaries is, you got your healthy boundaries. Then you have very porous boundaries, which can cause you setting yourself up to be a victim, right? And then you have very rigid, which keeps you at a distance from other people and, disconnected. And so each one of those boundary types, for lack of a better word right now, it's like a sign that says, hey, I don't want people to get close to me because they'll hurt me, or hey, I just want to connect with everybody, so I'm going to let people walk all over me. And then, the healthy boundaries are saying, hey, we can chill and all, but if you do that shit again, I'm leaving.
I've recognized all those in myself.
Yeah, I think we all tend to have all of them depending on certain situations, but we tend to also have like a go-to one that we do more frequently than others.
Well, as you said that, I was thinking that I feel like I end up having more porous boundaries most of the time. And the lie that I tell myself is it allows me to be more flexible. And then what does that cause me to do? It caused me to go to both other extremes where, or at least the main one that I go to is the type of distancing stuff. Yeah. I mean, but it's
well, I think the reason we tell ourselves the lie is because the world has lied to us and told us you're supposed to love everybody. No, you don't have to.
Well, and now this goes back, but this goes back
large.
to the role models, the lack of role models, because this has been a theme for me. I think Cass and I have talked about this a couple times, but like, the situation where, children are being raised, I mean, it's bad. You know what I mean? And it's bad. And it's not just like you have to be traumatized in a very physical, traumatic way. Like, I had an otherwise decent childhood, right? And it wasn't until I was, 30 years old, starting to try and dissect why I'm doing things the way I am. And then all of a sudden, all this unrecognized stuff bubbles to the surface. And it's like, oh, holy shit. The reason why I feel so angry, but I want to be heard. Why do I want to be heard? Because I've never been heard. And why is that? And wait, I didn't know I was never heard. I thought I was. And so then it's like, well, okay, well, what is hearing? And so now it's,
or what wants to be heard that hasn't been heard. Even if you were heard, what did you hold back on and why? Or what was dismissed and you just shut it down because you got a brick wall when you tried to, bring that up.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of avenue, I guess.
And there was a lot of times that mostly as kids, we were expected to be quiet, out of the way.
Be seen and not heard. And in a lot of cases, don't be seen either.
Yeah, go out and play. And when the sun comes down, come back. And hopefully you're not dead. Which, I mean, in theory, it sounds fine. But like in practice, like when you it doesn't work. And you wonder why all these people are starved for attention. Well, because you spent your entire childhood in the woods alone with your friends, and hopefully they didn't have any weird shit going on where bad stuff was going on, right? And that could be drinking, it could be 10-year-olds having sex, it could be all sorts of weird shit. I've heard a lot of weird shit, and I didn't realize how prevalent it was, and so then once you start to recognize that, and you start to see all that hurt in all these people, you start to realize, oh, you got to give people a little bit more grace for kind of their attitudes and their demeanors, because I mean, most of the time people shut down and they don't want to look at it ever again, and they're putting it in the box. And that's why they're perfectly content working 40 hours a week and going on their 2 weeks vacation. Not for me. I want to stare at that thing in the face, and I want to,
When I opened my practice, I wanted to give the establishment the finger, so I decided I'm going to work 3 days a week and be off 4.
Perfect. I love it.
So Tuesdays and Fridays, I typically don't see clients. Sometimes I might have an energy healing client or a coaching client. But it gave me the space to do my self-care, to do trainings, to do anything I wanted to learn about. Podcasts now. So, sometimes you just have to take that sovereignty back when you can recognize why you are the way you are, or why a collective, a group, a family is the way it is. And I think in our generation, we got a lot of mixed messages from the adults around us, because on one hand, we'd get that you're the whole world, I love you, and let's play checkers. And then the next minute it is you're to be seen and not heard, right? So I think one of the challenges I grew up with is I felt like an adult in a kid's body. So I felt really frustrated because had this expanded awareness, and I could understand a lot of the connections with things that other people couldn't see. I saw the patterns. And when I would bring up something to the adults and give them like, hey, what if you tried it this way or whatever, they'd be like, oh, she's just a kid. And I'm like, y'all are stupid. Y'all are stupid. And then if you think about the influences, like my mother, her mother was the oldest of 7. Like the whole dynamics of how many kids people typically had has changed just in that generation. And in that being the oldest of 7, that was around like the end of the Depression era. So there was a lot of scarcity mindset, and families really had to like save things, hold on to things. And my mother was a hoarder because of that. The attachment issues are underlying that, of course. But, I look at how these older generations, how the world influenced them, and then what did they pass down and what did they pass down? Now, there's not been a generation before this generation that had this at their fingertips. And so when we look at the older generations, what we often see is limitedness. We see a lot of, they didn't have therapy readily available. If you went to a therapist, you must have been rich, because there was no such thing as insurance either to cover it. So you had to pay out of pocket. Only people in Hollywood went to therapists, right? So mental health care was not there. A lot of the resources were not out there. And there was a lot of that scarcity mindset. That fear was real for them. The fear of not having enough or not being enough to make enough to feed a family, to take care of your family if somebody got sick. That was a very real threat. And that was only 2 generations from me back in my family.
So with that, like, okay, so people would get like, it wasn't as accepted. If people find out, they're going to talk about it. They're going to look at you a different way. And I mean, that still goes on today.
The stigma's still there.
The stigma attached to it. But it's hilarious, though, because like the stigma just increases that negativity. Like it's just feeding off each other after that.
Well, I see a lot of people who they still fear because they don't understand. They haven't really looked into it or known somebody that's really gone to therapy that is, working on themselves in a healthy way and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is there's that underlying fear of what's going to come up and come out, because that's even attached to the stigma too. Because if you were just being a woman and having these mood swings and you got pissed off and, lost your shit for a minute, you could be removed from your home, your community, and put in an asylum and given a diagnosis of hysteria, put on drugs, be sexually assaulted and have weird experiments done on you. And then when you died, you went in a pauper's grave. Nobody came to visit you at this. Nobody wanted to be seen going in or coming out, right? So we even still to this day have this underlying, and it's gotten a lot better, I do believe, but we still have this underlying like thread of fear of what's going to happen. Am I going to be seen as crazy? And I'm going to tell you this, just because I specialize in PTSD does not mean I work with people who are crazy. I work with people who are wanting to have their innate mental health help them heal through something they didn't ask for.
And see, like, with that, there's still the huge misconception that you're just having flashbacks and seeing it all in your head. Nobody realizes that it can be as subtle as it's the exact same day.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow your body is picking up. Yeah. Somehow the situation, let's say something happened on 4th of July. Somehow the situation leading up to it, it's similar.
Mm-hmm.
And your body starts picking up on that. Your nervous system starts picking up on that.
Yes. And there's the key, is the nervous system.
And it's happening subconsciously. So all of a sudden you start feeling those emotions, that fear, that hopelessness, and your body starts reacting and following it.
Yep.
And then that's it. But like people think it's a flashback. You're reliving it, you're seeing it, and that does happen.
Yeah, but not automatically. Not yeah.
Sometimes you are literally just feeling all those emotions, all that fear over again.
Yeah. Well, I feel like part of it is like there's a problem with our communication, because I feel like when, for example, when somebody's describing an experience as, reliving it, they could be meaning exactly what you just said, not necessarily visualizing it, but because, there's a little bit of, variety in how we can kind of interpret that, people chalk it up to however they want to be able to dismiss it. The other thing I think about what you guys are talking about is that the majority of people are just in denial. I think all these people who are all, so far against it, I think it's because they know that there's something inside of them that needs to be addressed, and they're resistant to it, right? It comes up
they're afraid they'll relive their trauma, and it's possible.
It's a guarantee. That's the whole point. Whether it's talk therapy, whether it's plant medicine, whether it's
disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree.
Okay. Well, let me finish it, and then you can disagree. So the idea is that, well, at least in plant medicine, is that a lot of times it takes you back to that experience. I've even had this in breath work where it takes you back to the experience, and now in a different frame of mind, in a different place of safety, you can revisit it and process what happened. We had soldiers who were blown up, and they got to relive the whole thing, and I've had that experience multiple times in my life. So now, is that the only way, and is that for everybody? Maybe not, but I do think that all roads kind of lead to, you have to get over it. And the way that you get over it is you have to understand it. So please disagree.
So here's the reason I disagree. I don't entirely disagree, but I do disagree because I take a unique approach. And I think that probably somebody other than me that likes to do research needs to look into this. But if you look at what trauma actually is, it's an energetic experience that overwhelms the nervous system, causing the person to go into fight, flight, or freeze, right? So what tends to happen if that person is not capable or has the resources, the people available to process through that quickly, find meaning in that, transmute that energy from the nervous system over time, over a certain amount of time, then you start having these symptoms of PTSD or other trauma-related disorders. So here's what I tend to do with my clients, and I've watched it work time and time and time again. They do not have to reprocess that trauma. They do not have to go through and rehash all of that, especially early on, because if they're coming to me, obviously they're already struggling and they're having a hard time coping with these symptoms. Why would I have them talk about that on the front end? Why would I have them rehash all that? So what I do is we work on the first thing when we're building relationship. I'm educating my client about energy, and I'm teaching them how to feel it for themselves, how to use their own psychic senses, clairaudience, mostly clairsentience, and claircognizance to notice what different energies feel like, and then be able to say, this energy in me, does this feel like mine, or does it feel like I'm carrying somebody else's stuff? Right? So they start differentiating, they start getting some discernment. And then when they feel like they're like, okay, I can sense where the trauma is in my body, they don't have to tell me what the trauma is necessarily. I can usually tell myself just because of my intuitive abilities and where they tell me they're holding it in their body. But they just have to locate it and be willing to energetically release that. And I teach them how to do that. And I guide them through that process of transmuting that energy. And I could do it for them, but that's not empowering. They need to do it for themselves. So once that's out of the way, it's kind of like saying, let me fix the environment of the flower, not the flower, right? Just get that out of the way. If that's out of the way, then we can work on the rest. And I have a whole process with that, of course, but it's kind of like saying, if you have a splinter in your foot and it causes you an infection, right? You've got to get the splinter out of your foot and treat the infection. If you treat only the splinter, you're going to continually have infection. You're going to get septic. If you treat only the inflammation or the infection and you leave the splinter in there, you're going to continually have infection. So it's kind of like you've got to get to the root on an energetic level without having to go into the psychological piece. And then I teach my clients how to do like nervous system regulation on the front end too. Like, let's learn how to breathe and, take back control of that vagal nerve. You didn't deserve what happened to you and yada, yada. So we get through all of that stuff, but they don't have to reprocess. I've had so many clients come to me and say, well, I used to work with this therapist and it was good at first and they did this technique and it helped for a while, but then it didn't. And I'm like, that's because you didn't get the energy out. You didn't get that root.
Okay.
Well,
so
right.
I'm gonna try to do a bridging process here. So I get what you're saying, because you really do have to start with the safety to process it. With plant-based medicine, it does put you in the calm enough state to reprocess it. And when you're reprocessing that in a calm state, and you do it more than once, you are actually teaching your nervous system to be calm during that state. You're re-experiencing it and redeveloping that model of the experience. And that's the same thing with you. You're putting people, they're actually learning how to be calm again. They're feeling safe again. But what I found, the safer you feel, your body and your mind's going to start making you experience it because you're safe enough now.
Well, so one thing that I would also add to what Mindy was saying was I totally agree, 100%. You do not, and because I'm working with a breathwork coach. I just saw her yesterday. Had a phenomenal experience, crazy, and she is of the same opinion. You don't ever have to revisit anything. You can just have your body let it go, and it's gone. I'm with you. But I also think there's a branch, right? Because I'm one of those people. I gotta know why and how.
Well, yeah, everybody's different.
Yeah. So that's the only thing I would say. So I would say we agree.
I have this certification to do like preparation for plant medicine journeys and then integration afterwards. So I oftentimes, when I have clients who want to go plant medicine route as part of their therapy, as part of their treatment plan, then the very first thing that I teach them is how to do the life force breath, because in the moment that plant medicine starts hitting, depending on what kind it is, sometimes you might get very sick for a while. And if you focus on the sick part, it's going to color the rest of your experience. Mm-hmm. If you start feeling Kundalini energy come up and your mind sees a snake coming up your body, if you panic and freak out because you don't know what that is, that's going to color the rest of your experience. One of the beautiful things I've noticed in working with people with trauma and going through my own healing is when you have a traumatic experience, whatever intuitive, creative, psychic abilities you have gets magnified, but it's locked into fear. So you're constantly looking for whatever's coming next that's a threat. When you transmute that energy and you work on the nervous system regulation, coping skills, making meaning, finding meaning, and then finding purpose in one's experience, what I see is people's intuition shifts because they start to self-love. They start practicing self-love and self-care. And when that intuition shifts into a love-based instead of fear-based, it's expansive. And then the person is not looking for threat constantly, or their nervous system is not. What they tend to start noticing is they're consciously looking for connection and guidance. And that's such a beautiful thing. So with going back to the plant medicine thing, is your experience is going to be based on how you set that up, how you handle it in the moment, and what are your intentions going into it. Going to like a clinic and doing ketamine is not the same thing as going to Costa Rica and doing ayahuasca, because you're doing more traditional ways in that kind of that part of the work. And in the clinical setting, it's just very clinical. So,
oh no, I'm with you. I've done it in all the settings, and there's nothing that compares to doing it with the tribe in the jungle,
right,
at the source. You know what I mean? Now, can you do it in
because
other
it's
places
so
and
deep
other
and meaningful.
modalities? Yeah, well, it goes back to well, as you know, set and setting are the most important, right? Setting and part of your set and setting is setting your intention. And if you're in the jungle and you have no cell phone reception and you've been in the jungle for a week before you drink the medicine, you know, it doesn't remove the, likelihood of you encountering that difficulty, but you're also with the ancestral tribe that has been dealing with these things for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. And so they've seen it all. And it's a beautiful experience. And you don't get that in a clinical setting, number one. And you certainly don't get that in these, fly by night ceremonies that they have, with 7,500 people all in a park somewhere.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy, and it's dangerous, and it's not cool. I'm not on board with that. But
and that's a testament to, how it's so natural for us to feel a spiritual connection when we're in nature, when we are engulfed in nature, when we're a part of it, and separated from what pulls us away from that. Like when we're on our devices, we're not usually, I mean, you might go sit on your porch or something, but you're engaged in something that's not alive. When you're outside in nature, you're alive, that's alive, and you're having an energetic exchange.
Well, I'll go even further to say that energetic exchange doesn't stop at the door. You know what I mean? It's always going on, right? Oh, yeah. And it's like Jordan Peterson says, everything has meaning or nothing has meaning. And so, so now, like, your thoughts are very important. Like I shouldn't be having these negative thoughts on loop. I can think a tree is just a tree and, it's in my way and I'm going to chop it down. Or you can say, that is a living thing. And do I really need to mess with it? Yes. And again, going back to like people, I think, I'll give you, my dad's a perfect example. He doesn't think there's anything more to life. He doesn't think there's a God. He thinks the lights go out. Doesn't make any sense to me, but it also makes sense as to the decisions he makes and, the way he goes about things. I was renovating this house that I'm in. I come around the corner and I see him snip sphere. Now, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. You need to cut that. Damn. But for the conversation's sake, let's just continue with that thread. He did some stuff and it wasn't cool. You know what I mean? Like, now, do I think that he single-handedly ruined the environment? No. But like, did we have to do that? And would I have let him do that? No. It's fine. Let's just figure out how to contain it. It's not that hard. But he doesn't care. Not his problem.
And that goes back to
that's the big
intention and discernment too. Do what? I'm sorry.
I'm on my kick on that's the thing is everybody. It's not their problem.
Well, but the thing is, it is, and they just won't recognize it, and they refuse to, and they actively turn away. I mean, we have this whole conversation going on with COVID right now, right? Anthony Fauci's getting roasted in front of Congress. He was getting roasted in front of Congress during COVID, and nobody gave a shit. So what are we doing now? Who cares? I mean, did something change that I missed?
You're kind of getting at too is all that conditioning about powerlessness. I think we're all three talking at the same time that time.
No, not me. Mindy, you go first.
Oh, I'm like going, what are we doing? No, I mean, if you look at the conditioning that has led people to feel powerless against a system, right? How many people are like, well, I'm just not going to vote because it doesn't matter? How many people are like,
Right.
well, I'm not going to go be an activist because it doesn't matter. I don't have any power. And some people are like,
Okay.
well, your vote is power. That's a minimal truth there.
See, that's kind of what I was getting at with the people saying it is what it is, was towards
Right.
that. Not, it was towards things like that. Well, it is what it is. What can I do about it? Blah, blah, blah. I mean,
Right.
but
Right.
that is the problem. You can speak about it.
Yes, it is, because this is where having that, I'm going to go back to that sacredness, right? Having that sacredness of each one of us, recognizing that we are all sacred, namaste, and all that. It's not all rainbows and unicorn farts, because there's real truths and real boundaries and real, hard lessons learned when you are walking in a sacred path. And, we aren't powerless, but when you've had 2000 plus years of being told you were powerless, and then watching or your loved ones be killed in front of your own eyes, when all of that has happened and it's trickled down all over this time, then, people do feel a certain amount of powerlessness. And, what comes to my mind a lot of times is that I think it was a political cartoon of a bunch of men bent over, and there's a chessboard. They're holding up the chessboard for like 2 or 3 people playing chess. And, the catchphrase was, if they just realized they could stand up, game would be over. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that is the truth. If we all really just said, you know what, I'm going to choose me. I'm going to choose to heal. I'm going to choose to walk from my heart, and I'm going to connect with people. I'm going to do my part in my community, because I can't necessarily do it for the whole world, but I can do it in my community. And when one person starts doing it, it's like a permission slip that goes to other people. And when people feel that heart-centeredness, they respond. When people feel criticized, judged, powerless, helpless, all of that, they don't connect. So it's that connection and that sacredness that is missing in society. And if we had that again, people would be like, wait a minute, they're supposed to represent us, but they're not representing us. We're going to represent ourselves now. And if we I'm not saying anarchy necessarily here, but we do need to look at how can we bring sovereignty back, right? Individually, collectively, in a way that actually works for the people, and can
I have a solution for that.
And these war pigs and stuff accountable.
Mm-hmm. You know how we do that? Stop paying your taxes. For the love of God, please stop paying your taxes. Everyone listening, stop. Marjorie Taylor Greene's onto something.
I didn't give them permission to take my income.
I didn't sign up for shit, and I'm not getting Social Security.
Authority? If you're a sovereign being, who is your authority? You are.
Well, the creator, but yeah, sure.
Well, you are creator. I can argue that one too.
Well, I would love to argue that one. I would love to argue that one.
This is where I get comfortable with the unknown, because I don't know yet. I don't know all the answers. Okay, I don't know.
Well, I can't say that I'm like 100%. This is the way it is. No, absolutely not. But what I'll say is that each one of us is kind of like a little God spark. That's the way I see it. It's like each one of us, and collectively together, all the sparks put together, that's God, that's creator, that's source. But each soul, each spark, right, carries its own unique frequency, its own unique, I'll say, library of skills and wisdom when you come into whatever incarnation I have next, which is not going to be here, but wherever I'm going next, I'm going to take what I've gained here with me, because whatever I've gained here with me is going to be helpful in the next incarnation, wherever that is. Maybe Jupiter, like that might be cool. Or maybe go play on the rings of Saturn,
Well, what was I going to say? I don't, or I agree with you, but see, this is like, for me, I have the same kind of thing where you have like the more like spiritual, esoteric truths that are kind of more like subjective, right? Although you find a lot of commonality with people, so it makes you wonder whether they are subjective or whether they're natural law, right?
It's
But
probably both.
but then you have what I call a slap in the face from reality, where it's like, okay, but we're here now in the 3D on planet Earth, and things work a certain way, and people do certain things, and they don't, it's chaos, right? There's not necessarily predictability. Now that's where you can start to get into manifestation and
Well, let me ask this question. Do you do the same thing at home that you do at work?
Me personally,
unless you work from home and you merge the two all the time, right?
No, that's what I do. I've designed my life that way. It took me.
But like most people separate from their house. They leave their house. They go do stuff.
Well, I mean, I do, but I'm an entrepreneur, and so I pick and choose where I go and what I do. My weeks, my months, my years, they don't ever necessarily look the same. Last year, I spent 6 months in St. Louis flipping a house. The year before that, I was flipping a house somewhere else.
Yeah.
In the background, I have my office here where I, doing this kind of thing.
Well, not necessarily you specifically, but like talking about people in general.
Mm-hmm.
If you work away from the home, right? If your life is not merged that way, do you do the same things at home that you do at work? Not usually. So,
in what sense?
Go ahead.
In what sense? Like examples.
So like let's say you work as a librarian, okay? You're putting books up, putting them in order. You're doing different things in the library all day. When you come home, are you doing the same thing? Or are you living a different life at home than you are at work? Now you're the same person, but you're in two different places, and you're doing some things here that you're not doing here. And some of the things you're doing at home, you might take to work, but usually there's a separation of the two. So when you think about this is one dimension out of how many that we actually are experiencing all in the now moment, this one seems more real because it's tactile, it's visceral, right? We literally can feel our bodies breathe air in and out. Well, I would stand to argue what air is at this point. It might be more plasma than air. But anyway, so the point there is that we're experiencing so much on so many different dimensions, but we haven't been taught that from an early childhood. We've only been taught that this third dimensional reality that we can measure and, we can do tests and repeat and get the same results and all that, that's reality.
The objective.
Right. And in reality, I should be able to put my hand through this wall because it's energy and I'm energy, right? So
you can only do that if you're a level 7.
Well, I'm 6.5, so 6.5 on the Hova bodies. Oh, but yeah, like it's not until we do slow down and relax and our nervous system is regulated and we set an intention to go within, to get into a different state of consciousness, however we do that, right? That we then can access these different dimensions. And a lot of times we have to have guidance. It's not like, oh, that's this dimension and that's that dimension. It's usually, okay, what are you experiencing? And you have someone who, like a shaman or a guide that says, okay, how would you categorize that particular dimension? I can break it down to even simpler. Okay, you got your physical. You're aware of what's going on with your body, what you're wearing on your clothes, how your hair feels on your head, way your butt feels in the seat. Are you also aware of what you're feeling, sensing, right? Are you aware of like what the molecules in your body are doing in this moment? Are you aware of all the libraries inside your DNA? No, you don't think about those last couple things until you're in a different state of consciousness or that intention is there and you go, let me explore what that might be like. And that's where plant medicine can get really helpful.
So my experience with this is we are taught linear thought, we're taught structure, but thank goodness my brain did not allow me to do that.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is we're also taught that, so we're too dependent on controlling our environment, and we fear being uncomfortable or the unknown. So if you can semi put yourself in a calm state, you can let go. So my mind likes to go everywhere all at once. But
Yeah,
then I freak out because like I can't focus on everything all at once. But if I ever get calm,
you
then
can
it's a little bit
choose.
easier to just give up control and
Yeah.
just let it go where it wants to.
I think in my personal life, having gone through a near-death experience at such a young age, and then followed by the out-of-body experiences that I had, I didn't have as much of that cultural conditioning blocking, because it's kind of like it burned off the the walls that would have started building at age 5, right? And I had a family that was kind of both religious and spiritual. At home, it was we kept it very quiet about how intuitive everybody was, because we talked about our dreams and intuitive experiences and spiritual understanding and things like that at home, but we didn't do that much in the community because it was a very like small town Alabama Southern
Mhm.
Baptist conservative community, right? So that fear of rejection is still very, very real, to this day. But for
To this
me,
day.
yeah, to this day. And so, like, for me, growing up the weird kid, where at first I thought all kids were like having the same experiences. I didn't realize it was weird. I didn't realize it was anything different. And I don't think it was initially too much, because we're still so wide open at age 5, 6. Once we get to like second grade, we start getting, I mean, even in kindergarten, we do get those messages of how to fit in, so to speak, like being judged, being rejected. And that sometimes, if you're brought up in a pretty decent family, that's the first time you experience things like that. So I didn't have a lot of those like cultural boundaries, the conditioning as much. I didn't have somebody telling me that's not real. At least not outside of my home. I mean, inside. In my home, if I experienced a monster under the bed, we made monster spray. So, and so kids who are discouraged, kids who are told that's not real from such an early age, it's way too easy to manipulate a mind. So it's
They
also
don't want to say
easy
it's
enough to
real
give.
because they don't know how to handle it.
Well, I'd agree with that, because what can't be controlled, by people who want the control, they will do whatever they can to try to control it, because they don't want it to be out of control. Because what if it gets me? That's the old part of our brain talking, right? So if you're like some billionaire sitting up high on your mound of gold, and you're like, I want people to keep bringing me gold, and you're not doing anything with it, just, or you're doing nefarious things. I won't go there right now. But if you are wanting to control others for your own gain, is that not evil?
Say that one more time for me.
Well, I have to backtrack, because I just realized I needed to be a little more specific. If you are trying to control and manipulate others for your own gain, if that gain is in for gluttony, if it is for self-service, then is that not a form of evil? You're oppressing others for you to feel what? Bigger and better and more powerful? Why does it have to exist? I just don't understand. I think I come from another world and just don't get this world.
No, see, I was trying to think of the best way to explain that, like through like the polarity of it though, because I get what you're saying. As long as you're not doing it basically for your own gain, but at the same time, it still goes back to the whole boundary. It depends. Like, is it for your well-being? I guess
Right.
not
That's
gain, but for
different.
your
Yeah,
well-being.
that's the reason I had to backtrack, because I was like, Are you doing things nefarious with it? Are you doing it just to feel powerful, right? Or are you doing it to be able to take care of yourself
Can't
and your
hear you.
family? Yeah, your sound's not working. It showed that your mic was muted and then it wasn't. Mm-mm.
But see, that's also where it goes back to the whole discernment. You have to learn how to judge for yourself because there's nothing but polarity with every choice and every action.
You know, I ask my clients a lot of times because we do tackle scarcity mindset a lot in therapy. I ask them, if you had all the money you would ever need, if you had the wealth in financial, and you got financial freedom, complete freedom, all your bills are paid, all your debts are paid off, you can go do anything, everything you want to do, what would you do? We're not used to having that much freedom.
Can you guys hear me now?
Start.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It switched my input for some reason. So I hear you and I agree with you. But here's the question, right? What if you're not conscious of it? Right? Like my dad, my mom, these people in my life who I can see these things in. Number one, it doesn't mean that I'm right. Number two, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist either. But they, like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. My grandmother, right? She manipulates people, right? She's long dead now, right? But that's just what. Why? For what? She just wanted to poke people.
Shadow reasons.
Well, right, sure, right. And so now, and then she passed that on to my dad, and my mom had her family pass it on to her, and then
that's how conditioning works.
Theoretically, I'm where it stops, and this is where it goes into a new direction. But like you asked a great question. Is manipulating people to your own self-service evil? I don't know if I would say that it goes full evil, but I like looking at things on a scale, and it definitely doesn't point the right direction. And that's something that I personally am extremely conscious of, and I don't know why. Actually I do. My parents really wanted everything to always be equal, right? As much as, and it was crazy how equal things could be. But now so now it kind of or I can make it benefit me where, I am extremely aware, or I try to be extremely aware of what my internal motivations are. Am I pure of my intention, right? And then there are those times, especially in business, where it's like I have to look out for myself and I have to get what I want and I have to get it to the maximum. It doesn't mean that I'm taking advantage of anybody necessarily. So that's where, there's the gray area of, well, is it evil? Is it not evil?
Is it causing harm or oppression?
You're
manipulating.
That's great. And so that's where I would go to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you're impeding on somebody's liberty, then we have a problem, right? So if my requests of you are taking from you, right, in a detrimental way, yeah, that's where I would say it's probably going.
You mean like the IRS?
Yeah, like being held at gunpoint to give your money up.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Well, that's because that's what it is. Yeah. But I'll give you a hint. If we all stand up and stop paying our taxes at the same time, are they going to be able to get us all?
And how would you get people to do that, though?
Do what?
But see, okay, so how would you get people to do that? This is where the duplicity comes in. You have to be able to influence people to get them to see the problem, because they're already influenced to pay it.
Right.
Well,
and you have to get them to understand that what they were doing was unconscious. If you bring it to their attention and then they still choose, that's the problem. And this is where I get really frustrated with people in life, is like, if you are presented with new information and you can't even open your mind to it, and you know that it exists, and then you turn around and you choose to ignore it and go back to sleep, that's the problem.
But
That's called ignorance.
why do we do that? Why do we do that? We have all the convenience, all the distractions that we want in the world right now.
I think it has to do with a sense of identity, honestly.
But that goes back to conditioning. Like, how do you break somebody out of it? How do you get them to stop ignoring it? That's what they were taught.
Right. And we know change doesn't happen until someone is uncomfortable enough with the situation, either internally or externally, right? So if you want to live in ignorance and bliss and you're comfortable there, is that not your right to live in liberty, in pursuit of happiness? At the same time, if you are presented with information that says, hey, let me educate you, rather than you living in ignorance, and you choose not to listen, you choose not to take that in, that's willful ignorance. To me, willful ignorance is what locks people down into an identity that merges with the conditioning they're presented with. Does that make sense?
But
it does, but
that's still conditioned with fear.
Well, hold on. It goes to identity, because
that's what I'm saying. Yes,
they've identified themselves with the information and opinion that they have, and if they accept the new information, that means that they're wrong.
Right, and then the fear is, if I admit that, I lose a sense of identity, and if I lose a sense of identity, where do I belong? And that goes back to Maslow's, pyramid.
I lose love, I lose significance, I lose and the thing is, it's not real. Nope. It's not even real. You're assuming that, you're thinking that it's a creation of your mind, but then again, that goes into I don't think it's a creation of your mind.
I think it's a creation that has been implanted from all the conditioning from all this time.
But it's not completely false, because when you speak up, some people do get uncomfortable and you do lose some people in your life.
I've shed everyone. There isn't a single person in my life who I haven't shed. And it's because and it's not because they can call me, but they won't, because, I can only listen to your same sob story so many times before I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Staying stuck in victim mode. That's
what. Well, that's what it is. And so then it's like, well, hey, buddy, I think you might be a little bit, and I don't, call, it's,
or just say, what are you going to do to improve here? What are you going to do to do something different?
I do what I say a good friend would do, which is call you out. Hey, do you need help? I see this area that you're having an issue with. I see a pattern. If anybody sees a pattern in my life, feel free to pull me out of it, please, because I've caught myself in many of them and it's taken years. So if you could save me the time, that would be great. But these people that we're talking about, they don't have that mentality about any of this, and they don't want to be pulled out of the illusion that they've created. And I do understand it, right? And it does have to do with the programming and the conditioning. It goes back to birth. It has to do with the systems. But at some point, there's a choice. And again, we're at a point in the world where we have information at our fingertips. If you don't know what the answer is, that's your fault.
And you also have to develop discernment to know what information is most true for yourself, as well as maybe the collective.
Well,
because you can get all kinds of information. If you want to argue that the sky is orange because there's gold in the air, you can find something to back that up online, right?
And that's where y'all are both
right. That's what you're looking for, right?
And that's where y'all are both right. It goes back to identity. You have to give up that false identity, which is extremely hard, unfortunately, because you give up a lot of things. Sometimes you give up a lot of things with it. And then you can develop more of your discernment, your choice.
Growth means there are parts of yourself that no longer serve you, and you recognize that, and you're willing to let it go. The part of me that used to play small and keep quiet does not serve me or my highest good anymore. It does not serve humanity, because I'm a humanitarian at heart. So the part of me that used to play small was the part of me that was scared of everything because I was overwhelmed with stimulus as a child, conflicted with the information and experiences because they didn't always match, and then mistreated because I was different. And so all of that, even all of that has its place within this whole like mesh of conditioning and control, right? And when I finally kind of realized, wait a minute, all these crazy experiences I've been having my whole childhood, they were actually more true than the bullshit we're living in, right? And so when I finally like realized, wait a minute, you have important things to say, you have knowledge, you have wisdom, why not open your mouth and do it? If you're wrong, get corrected, whatever. But playing small is why we are still stuck where we are overall in humanity. But I see we're getting unstuck. I do see hope. I see a lot of people waking up and choosing to do differently and be more conscious and, intentional about the things that they're doing and saying, and people changing jobs because they're like, wow, that's not me anymore. Right. So that whole sense of identity is shifting. And again, I go back to my whole message is when you set your identity in alignment with your highest self, your divine nature, you're going to come from the heart. And when each one of us come from the heart, when each one of us rebalance that feminine and masculine within, and that union is there again, we transcend duality. We become a whole new being. That's new earth, that new earth consciousness. That's where that comes from. That's the Sophia Christos. So what is the return of Christ? It's the return of the feminine Christ, if you ask me.
Oh no, sorry, I'm having a moment.
Brain blank.
This is where I go to language also, because everybody speaks it through their own lens.
Exactly.
But to me, it's still all the same thing to me.
It's all the same stuff. Yeah.
That goes back to the whole reality of it. We're all saying the same thing through our best interpretation.
That's why I think all religion is, right? It's the same story, just being told being told a little bit differently. I don't disagree with you, but however, the whole return to Christ theme thing is not something I am very well versed in.
Well, what I would say is Christ consciousness, because that is not religious based at all.
Mm-hmm.
What the Christ consciousness, right, is living from the heart space from 0 point.
Mm-hmm.
And living in making choices from a place of love rather than shadow, fear.
Right. And you're saying that the return of that consciousness is the union between absolutely. 100%. 100%. And, it's, I don't really understand how, we're on the verge of a holy war when this is really the substance of the stuff. I mean,
I think it's more of a psychological warfare at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is, and that and that's where it can go.
Don't get me started.
That's where we can go into the cabal.
Frequency wars.
Cabal, yeah. Oh, listen, frequency wars. Let's take the cell phone towers down.
Right.
Fuck the flock cameras. Take the cell towers down.
Okay, but I also think that is a trick. I think it's a trick because is belief not supposed to be the most powerful thing? So if you believe it affects you, then it does.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So it's all manipulation of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes and no. I mean, that's another thing where I would say, I would say yes, because we live in reality where it's happening and you have to be affected by it. But then I also, in the same hand, believe that I'm ordainedly protected by the Creator, and whatever happens will happen, and I'm comfortable with that.
And then the whole DNA thing in the libraries. Heck, it might not be me, but it's going to be the generations passed down. We are adaptable beings, and it goes back to belief and science and theology. It's all the same thing.
In 2023, I had heart surgery, And the pain was so intense and I was not able to really function. 3 days later, I had a stroke in the occipital lobe, which is your visual cortex. Well, they put me in the hospital for 11 days to do testing to find out why. And I'm like, shitty pain management. That's why, because they sent me home with, never mind, I'm not going to go there. Anyways, they couldn't really find a definitive answer. But what I had was central vision loss. And when they told me, because I had missed the golden window, I thought I'd had an ocular migraine and didn't go to the hospital in time. And I was told, you've missed the golden window. This is likely to be permanent. You might restore some of it. Wherever you are in 6 months is where you'll be. And I knew, spiritually speaking, that I was not destined to live with that. So I just refused to believe it. And then I acted on it. I acted on my belief of refusal, of rebuking that, by looking up information on how to rehabilitate, and started immediately rehabilitating by painting. And I painted and drew and all this kind of stuff with my vision being weird. And y'all, I'm telling you what, central vision loss is weird because it's not a black hole in front of you. It's your brain just fills in that blank space with whatever colors are around it. So people didn't have noses and part of a mouth. It was kind of funny. Like everybody looked like Voldemort.
It was like a Jackson Pollock painting or whatever.
So crazy. It was crazy.
Do you still have paintings from that period?
Yeah, I do.
You should.
Well,
you
I'll
should
tell you what I did. You'll appreciate this, I think. So I knew that I was making progress because by the time I was discharged, I could see part of the nose and I could see the whole mouth again. So I knew I was on the right track. So when I got home, I had some time before I was going back to work and seeing clients, and I was like, what am I going to do to keep from getting bored? And I need to keep working on rehabilitating this. So I decided to paint the 22 major arcana of the tarot. I shit you not. I lived out every one of those card meanings as I painted it in real time, down to I was literally at the kitchen table painting the tower and the devil card when the ex walked in, sat down, and wanted to have the breakup conversation. And if you know anything about tarot, the major arcana tells the hero's journey. And if you know anything about tarot too, you know that they are angelic frequencies. So I did the hero's journey in real time. Every movie you've ever watched, every story you've ever read, that's the underlying thread of all of them, is the hero's journey. So look into Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? So when I finished the last one, my vision was restored except for about 5%. And that 5% is still gone, but I don't see it as damage. I see it as an opening because I have a depth. I started painting like a master. Like, this was fucking crazy. I'm painting like a master after having an ocular stroke. I mean, a occipital stroke. And I had a couple of art shows and all that, but I noticed that I had a depth to my art as well as a depth to my clairvoyance that I didn't have before. So for me, that was one of the big reasons why I started shifting how I work with some of my clients in trauma, because looking at the meaning making helps that person find the purpose in having the experience to begin with. So if you can say, oh, like that tornado went through town and it like destroyed some buildings, well, maybe that space needed to be made available to build a new school or something. It's that kind of thing. Sometimes what we think is damage is a blessing.
Sometimes it's space lasers and Oprah Winfrey needs a new tennis court.
Did you have to ruin the moment? Like,
do what?
I said, do we have to ruin the moment? That was good. It was really good.
Yes. The answer is yes. It was beautiful, and I had to bring it down.
Got to bring that balance in, right?
Reality. Paint your roof blue. But no, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. And it really is beautiful. It is beautiful, and it's a shame that people don't really see it that way a lot of times. And instead they want to point the finger and blame and then never really grow from that situation.
Right.
It's have you ever? It's a really short, small book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. Have you ever read it?
Mm-mm.
It's like a kind of like a basic finance book, save 10% of your money, this kind of thing. But the premise is that this guy comes to King Solomon because in Babylon, all the wealth has gone to the rich people. And, they're trying to figure out what to do about that because, the poor people aren't happy about it. And so, this master finance guy gets called into the king because they're contemplating just, redistributing all the gold. And he basically says that, well, if you do that, it'll just, come right back because you haven't addressed, like you said earlier, the core issue of why they're spending their money that way. And so if we can teach people these lessons and give them a literacy, well, now, they'll make better decisions, right? Instead of eating, spending your money hand to mouth, put 10% of your money away.
And this is how we flip that conditioning. How we release that. And what you were saying, I don't know why, I guess it's intuitive, but when you were talking about that, it made me think about like how, especially for females, carrying that generational and ancestral trauma in the body, even if you've never had your own trauma, there are cases where a woman would get in a situation where she suddenly felt threatened by a man. And he may have not done anything but looked at her and smiled, right? But for whatever reason, just out of the blue, she has a trauma reaction. And then people are like, what? Why is she acting so crazy? He didn't do anything, yada, yada. And she's having a full-on trauma reaction. Come to find out, her grandmother had been raped, right? So we can carry and have trauma reactions